To what degree should art aim to entertain? Is there an inherent contract between filmmaker and viewer? And does a work need to be enjoyable to satisfy? We ask these questions and more as we review Ruben Ostlund's 2017 film, The Square. Hello, peoples, and welcome to Esoterica Cinema, the program where we take films from the cinematic multiverse and discuss the hell out of them. My name is Jason Peters, and with me, as always, is the man who once built a homemade CB radio to communicate with the ghost of Groucho Marx himself, Mr. Ryan Seabold.
What's up, Jason? How's it going, buddy?
Man, let me tell you, dude, I totally plan on stealing your radio and calling up some old dead celebrities. I'm thinking maybe like Rodney Dangerfield. Hey, wait, why don't you come and wake me up? Still get no respect, even when I'm dead. Rest in peace,
you bet your life
ass.
You do, buddy. You bet your life you do.
But until I steal your radio from you, let's go ahead and talk movies. Do you have a description of today's film, sir?
I do. From 2017, today we're talking about Ruben Ostlund's The Square. Google has this one described as: a decadent curator faces an existential crisis, as does his gallery, when he hires a public relations team to build some hype for his renowned Swedish museum, which ends in disaster. This one stars Claes Bang, if I'm saying that right, Elizabeth Moss, Terry Notary, all kinds of people, and it was made on a budget of $5.5 million, brought in a box office of just under $10 million. So Ostlund got to live to fight another day, as I love to say, and went on to go make Triangle of Sadness, which I have not seen but heard only good things about. I was really looking forward to this. I will say this one was a bit of a mixed bag for me. I wasn't sure how to really suss this out, but I am looking forward to getting into all of that and going down the rabbit hole of asking ourselves, what is art, Jason, and what is cinema? But as always, I got to ask you, what did you think about this movie, buddy?
I'll be happy to tell you, Ryan, but first, I do want to go ahead and thank our podcast audience for listening. Really appreciate it. If you guys are listening, go ahead and rate and subscribe. As well, to our YouTube viewers, appreciate you watching. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you haven't yet. And then as you're watching the review, if anything comes up that you would like to comment on, go ahead and drop that in the comments below, and we would love to read that and get back to you. Now, Ryan, to answer your question directly, this was a tough film for me. It was an interesting experience that I can't say I necessarily enjoyed in the moment, but at the same time, I do think that it was satisfying to consider a lot of the stuff on the back end. And so it's going to be a unique coverage of a film. It's going to be very different from our past reviews in that, the narrative of this film is not about the narrative. The narrative sort of exists to communicate various themes and sub-themes and ideas and ask questions. So to go through this, moment by moment, the way that we structure some of our other reviews, it really wouldn't lend itself to what this film is about. And so because of that, I think maybe it's a bit more on the nose to look at some of the themes and just sort of use different scenes as a springboard to identify some of those themes. So I think that's kind of the way that we can approach this. And like I said, it is an interesting film. Like, I can't say that I necessarily enjoyed it all the time, but it's still beautifully shot and beautifully staged and very well crafted. And the more I thought about it after the fact, it's like, I think some of the less enjoyable moments in the film actually do sort of exist for a reason. Sure. But at the same time, I can also acknowledge that it's not necessarily enjoyable. And so that's kind of why we start the cold open at the top of the show here with some of those questions, because I think that this is a film that sort of asks, what is art and what is entertainment, and how does a film exist between those two places? And, what does a filmmaker owe a viewer, and what does a viewer owe a filmmaker? And so I think these are very interesting questions that we're allowed to ask as a result of what this film is. But at the same time, again, I could acknowledge that, like, as a purely enjoyable experience, this wasn't that. And look, it's 2.5 hours, right? I will, even though it has a lot to say, I don't necessarily know that it earns all 2.5 hours. I think we could have gotten I don't think we would have lost much if we shaved a half hour off of it, and it would have allowed it to move a little bit better. But again, some of the more frustrating sequences in the moment, the more I thought about them after the fact, they did sort of disclose not obvious depths and points. So yeah, great, very much a mixed bag, high level. And it sounds like it was that the case for you as well.
Yeah, I went into this completely blind. I knew nothing about this film. I know more about Triangle of Sadness and Ostlund's previous film, Force Majeure. But this one completely slipped under the radar for me. I knew nothing about this film. So as such, I was a little confused going into it about the tone.
Okay.
Based on the box art or the poster art of Terry Notary shirtless doing the 8-man routine and all of that, which is a very small part of the movie.
Yeah.
I was expecting more abstract performances, kind of in a way. I was expecting a similar experience that I got from Leos Carax, like from Holy Motors or Annette.
Yeah, definitely.
That we've talked about on this show before. Something
fair, yeah.
even, maybe Terry Gilliam-esque or David Lynchian, anything like that.
Just more surreal, over the top, zany.
Right.
Yeah. Sure.
Right. And then when you come into this, it's an art exhibit called The Square, where it's like an Ollie Ollie Oxenfree kind of safe place where people can ask for help, or you can, it's meant for gratitude and all these things. I thought, well, this is going to turn dark, or this is going to not go well, or humans are going to exploit this in some way. It's going to be filled with 250,000 people all looking for a handout, and then they kill each other or something, in a very Squid Games kind of, vibe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was expecting kind of a Twilight Zone turn for the worse, but, Black Mirror or something, but you don't get those things. This was just a month in the life of a curator, museum curator or manager of sorts. And all these random happenings. In fact, the square itself, the art exhibit itself, for which the movie is named, is a very small part of the film. It doesn't really have that much space, other than to motivate that, the advertising campaign that gets him into a lot of hot water. But even that is just one of the vignettes that kind of happen along the way to this guy in the midst of everything. So I think I will say that it was a much more enjoyable experience, I think, to go in blind. I'm glad that I did. However, I do think that I would have liked to have known the genre of the film. At least I would have liked to have known that it was satire and like what I was up against versus, I think I would have been in on some of the jokes or some of the mirrors that it was holding up to society would have landed on me instead of me just waiting for something that never was to come.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's tricky too. I mean, to your point, I think that a lot of people had difficulty classifying this film because I think I remember when I Googled it, Google had it listed as a thriller/comedy or something like that. So you kind of expect that it's going to be a dark comedy.
Or drama/comedy,
whatever it was. And in certain ways it is all those things, but also it's not, because it's just incorporating a lot of these elements to make these sort of like larger, almost like meta commentary observations about film and society and art and all of that. So, I think that if we kind of actually start, delving into some of these specifics of where the film is communicating some of these different ideas, because look, a film can't obviously just start with a placard that says like, this is satire, or, and there, or later on there's some sort of exchange and then like a little graphic comes up and says like, here's another satirical moment. Right. So it's it's tricky to sort of communicate these different elements, right? And so as a filmmaker. And so I think that one of the ways that we sort of are set up for that is in that early conversation, right up top between Elizabeth Mott's and
Klaus Bang.
Yeah. And so, we get a moment where she asks about this like super ridiculous passage that she found on the website about like exhibitionism versus like non-exhibitionism. And, it's this like long 30-second ridiculous pretentious paragraph. And the way that she reads it and the pregnant pause that he gives before he responds and then asking to see it and such, I think that's kind of stylistically and tonally kind of one of those, the director moments where the director is communicating communicating that, hey, this is satire. Like, I think we're meant to laugh at the ridiculousness of this very pretentious passage that, you know, is reflective of, even if we're not in the like high stakes or, you know, expensive art world, we've seen enough of it represented in media to sort of be familiar that it's very pretentious and there's a lot of bullshit. And so I think we sort of get like, oh, okay, that's where this is coming in.
Exhibition, non-exhibition. An evening conversation that explores the dynamics of the exhibitable and the construction of publicness in the spirit of Robert Smithson's sight, non-sight. From non-sight to sight, from non-exhibition to exhibition, what is the topos of exhibition, non-exhibition in the crowded moments of mega exhibition?
Can I?
Do you want to read it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't. I'm sorry. I'm clearly not as scholarly as you are.
And then, you know, we see some of that also a little bit later with like the exhibit of just the piles of rocks and stuff like that, you know, and then they have a whole scene where like some of it accidentally gets vacuumed up and they have to do this whole like Mission Impossible thing to sneak in and steal it before anyone notices. And it's like, nobody would ever notice that at all. It's just these like piles of like blasted concrete or whatever it is, right? You know, and so I think
he
those
even
are
says
the
like,
ridiculous
because she's like, what are we going to do? The you know, cleaner, you know, accidentally vacuumed up some of the dust from that art installment, you know, and then he kind of just nonchalantly lays the whole thing bare, where he's like, you know, it's just piles of dust. Like, we'll just put some, you know, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go in, we're going to put it back. And no one's going to know because it's piles of dust. And so it's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then I do feel like, you know, more so than being a film of, again, you know, plot points and narrative progression, I think it's fair to say that this is more a film about the themes, you know. And so if a traditional film has, you know, its main narrative arc or plot line with a couple subplots strewn about, I think that this film is more about like doing that, but from like a thematic standpoint, right? It's about like a, you know, thematic plot and subplot. And so I think that different scenes exist to reinforce some of the ideas that are being expressed. And we can sort of look at where the director is communicating these ideas. And so also, you know, in that opening exchange, we have the moment that we talked about before the show with the briefcase, you know, and I think that sets up the film's sort of central tenet, right? Which is that like, what is art, you know, right? It's the meme, like, but is it art, right? But I do think that this is one of those films. It's examining what makes art, what makes entertainment, what is film, how much does a filmmaker owe an audience entertainment versus their own point of view? All these sort of ideas are being expressed and examined through this film, and maybe not even coming to conclusions on them. I think some of those ideas it does have particular ideas about, but others it's maybe just asking us, right? And so he brings up this idea of her briefcase. And so, you know, she asks him to illustrate it and he says, well, your briefcase right there, you know, is that a work of art in and of itself? And she's like, no, it's not. It's like, okay, but if I was to take that briefcase and I was to set it up on a display and I was to put some lights up and I was to give it a placard and maybe put a price tag on it and, you know, advertise, like, would that make it art at that point? And so she's like, okay, yeah, that makes a little bit more sense. I kind of understand the whole nature of what's being asked here. And so, again, I think that's one of the film's ideas is it's, you know, asking us those same questions through its characters. And one of the questions I had specifically for you, Ryan, and I know this is going to be kind of a bit of a loaded question here because there's a lot of meat on this bone, right? But at the top of the show, I mentioned that, you know, ask the question, you know, what is the nature of the contract, if you will, between filmmaker and viewer, right? Like, how much entertainment value does a filmmaker owe an audience versus how much do they owe them their own strict point of view? And how much patience and how much trying to understand the artist's point of view does an audience owe them, especially when, you know, they've paid for their ticket and they've, you know, purchased this product, so to speak, right? I know there's a lot to sort of break down there, but like, you know, just thinking about that question, you know, what are some of your initial responses to that?
My initial response is I'm going to throw it back to you and let's go ahead and talk about Ari Aster's Beau is Afraid for a little while and see.
Okay.
No.
Sure.
So,
no, I'd love to. Yeah.
Right. How much did he
Would love
owe
to
you
talk
as
about this film, actually.
as a viewer and to be entertained? And no. So I think that a couple things, because you're right. This is a loaded question. I think that high level, I think my first response to that is that I'm a free market guy. I think that artists can make whatever the hell they want as long as they can go seek funding and all of that. That's between them and their investors and the producers. As long as everybody's on the same page that this is the vision and we're all going to move forward together. Now, if they're divisive or they pull a fast one and they make a bunch of bullshit because they were hired to make this and they make that. But again, that doesn't have anything to do with me as the viewer or the audience member. I think that's the contract is the business side of it. The art side of it should be fully expressive, and you should be able to you should be free to make whatever you want and express yourself and put it out there. Now, if the market rejects it or it doesn't land or, it doesn't reach people in the way that, you think it will, then such is life. You tried, swing and a miss. That happens with artists all the time. That happens with musicians. That happens with movies or literature. Some of that might have had to do with marketing or, even just timing, when things get released sometimes can bomb a film. So, or a piece of art. So, where it was placed, these are themes that are actually even explored in this movie that Ostlund is even proposing in the sense that, this art exhibit, the Square, is something that's coming out where, again, like I said earlier, it's like a safe place, the square that's on the ground where, the concept is that it's a place where people can come and be kind to one another. It's removed from the outside world. Invisible boundaries, all the bullshit that exists out in the world goes away, and we can just be humans and be nice to each other and all of that. And all the formalities and stuff get stripped away. But because it was pitched with that hype video that the advertising company, those, advertising bureaus come in and they film a young girl that is asking for help, a young homeless girl, as innocent as she can be and maybe all of 5 years old, is asking for help. And then they blow her up. She explodes to show the, the craziness of mankind and how we're all mean to each other and all of that, right? But because they pitched it that way, the exhibit fails. And then he is now going to lose his job and all the dominoes start to fall in his life. So, but did that have anything to do with his contract to the viewer of that art installment or exhibition? No, that was just, so all that to say, because it was a loaded question, I'll kind of rein it back in and say that I think art should exist however you want it to. If it fails, that's such as life. Or if it succeeds, maybe sometimes lightning won't strike twice. There are one-hit wonders all the time and stuff like that. So I don't think that there's a necessarily a contract or an agreement on the show side of it. Now, on the business side of show business, that's a different story, because if you're being hired to do a job and you decide to go get all crazy with it and you don't provide what you had agreed to provide, then that's another topic altogether. But because there are two sides to this whole equation, it's, at the end of the day, this is a business. But if you're just in it to go express yourself, do your thing, baby.
Yeah, that's what becomes difficult about, any sort of mainstream release or, any release that, costs a significant amount of money that isn't just some sort of, art film, personal student or otherwise, which is that it doesn't strictly exist in the realm of art and it doesn't strictly exist in the realm of entertainment. And so it becomes difficult because I would say that it sounds like we have kind of a similar outlook on this, which is that, I would say that an artist really has, when you're talking about, so first of all, I will say that I do think there's an unspoken contract between any artist and their audience, right? And it can be different. It can be different for each artist. And to be honest, it's probably likely that the artist sets the terms of the contract. And then based on those terms, their audience does or does not sign up, right? And so the more accessible you can be, the more you say like, hey, you know what? I am an entertainment artist, right? I am a Steven Spielberg filmmaker. I am a Stephen King author. I am a Britney Spears musical artist, right? Like, these aren't people where it's like, hey, I'm here to cut open my heart and bleed on page. And, you're going to have to deal with all of the messiness and everything that exudes, right? They're really here because they're here for
That's
you.
Taylor Swift.
They're here for you, the audience, right? They're here to make work that satisfies a mainstream audience in a very particular sort of way. And that is by way of entertainment, right? There may be some observations made along the way that are poignant and that can make you consider, right? But when Steven Spielberg makes Jurassic Park, it's not because he wants to examine the human condition or he wants to consider the nature of homelessness in America or the world as a whole, or he wants to poke fun at the art world. Like, he just wants to deliver you, the viewer, a thrilling experience, right? And because it is so fashioned after our enjoyment, it's an easy contract for us to sign and say, yes, I will sign up to give you my $20 and watch this movie. Whereas if somebody's like, hey, I'm going to make a really difficult personal film that deals with child abuse and shows you graphic scenes, and I'm going to ask you to come along for that ride, a lot of people are not going to sign that contract, right? But maybe the few that do are very glad that it exists. And so as a result, you know, we have to look at that and say, okay, not as many people are willing to sign this contract. Ergo, we can't put as much money into it because we're not going to make our money back. Because again, this is a business and there's a business side to things. But I think that each film that we as a viewer enter into comes with built-in expectations. And again, those expectations are set by the filmmaker. And again, that is the nature of the contract. So, you know, you watch a Steven Spielberg film and it's, hey, I'm here for you. Enjoy the next 2 hours. They're going to be thrilling. If you watch a Pier Paolo Pasolini film, right, it's like, hey, I am here to make you very uncomfortable for the next 2 hours. You will probably hate me when this is done. You know, sign this contract. Most people are like, that sounds horrible. No, you're going to show small kids eating feces. I want nothing to do with that. And he's like, well, I'm not changing. And so, you know, again, there's only a handful of people that are going to sign that contract. So that's kind of what I talk about is like, you know, where does the line draw between what an artist owes a viewer and what a viewer owes an artist? Because I do think that if you as a viewer are here for an artist's point of view, and you're looking for something original and unique and not just something that's thrilling, something that does examine, you need to give the filmmaker more patience than you would otherwise, right?
Well, and sometimes these things take a while to find their audience too. You know, there's a timeliness to some of this too. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Some of these, just a few weeks ago, we covered, or a little while ago, we covered Ed Wood. And, you know, that was a guy that, you know, was panned and by all his critics. And then, you know, cut to 40 years later and Tim Burton's making a movie about him. So I'm not saying he's a great artist. Maybe this is a bad example, but my point is, you know, sometimes, you know, and he was setting out to entertain. That was his whole shticks, but, you know.
Well, I mean, that doesn't mean that everybody is good at what they do, right? Like you could sign a contract with a, you know, a house contractor and they can completely screw things up. Like, but you sign the contract and you just have to deal with it. Yeah. I mean, not everybody is good, but it's just, again, it's, you know, what are the expectations, you know, I guess between both sides.
Art is expression. You're expressing yourself. You got something going on up here or in here and you want to get it out there and put it out for the masses. You know, it's a personality trait. It's a method of exhibition, you know, and exposing yourself in a lot of ways sometimes. So I think that you need to be free as an artist to express yourself and to put those things out there without always, because you'll drive yourself crazy thinking about, well, what is everybody going to think of this? Will they like me? Will they hate me? As you're going through that process, you have to be vulnerable and, you know, not second guess yourself. Now, and then also be free to fail because so much of art is failure and learning from that failure and growing. Not going to do that again, you know. You know, we've done that plenty on this show. So it's, you know, important to me. If you're asking me, you know, the social contract between the artist and the viewer or the recipient of that art, the enjoyer of the art, you know, fuck them. Like you gotta let those shackles go and express yourself. You gotta be able to put the briefcase in the light and you know, does that mean all of it's going to work? No, hell no. Most of it does not, you know, but that's growth and that's how we progress as artists. And the second you start to say, there's some kind of, you know, agreement or contract, so contract or unspoken agreement between these two, you know, moving parts. Again, to me, the agreement is on the business side. You know, if you're being hired to provide a product, that's different. Now you're a contractor. Or if you've made a pitch to a movie studio or to a record label, I'm going to go do this, and then you provide that. they're going to be like, what the hell is this? You kind of end up in a quandary there as well. So, but sometimes it works out to your advantage that way as well. I mean, that was kind of Brian Wilson's thing with Pet Sounds. You talk about the Beach Boys and stuff, and he just holed himself up and created this crazy nonsense album that everyone was like, what is he doing? Because it was so not Beach Boys, but then now it's heralded as one of the greatest albums of all time. And a masterpiece for what it is.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah.
And it goes both ways. And that's why there is no easy answer, because then you have famously the Freddie Mercury solo album, right? Where he was just like,
Sure.
Stand aside, guys, I got this. And then everyone was
Right.
like, oh no, this is horrible, right? So yeah. And
or like I said, Ari Aster's Beau is Afraid, which is one of your top 10 favorite movies of all time.
But, famously, Martin Scorsese recently came out and showed a ton of support for that movie, and he really enjoyed it. He's seen it several times. And so, I'm not going to sit here and say I know more about cinema than Martin Scorsese, right? But I also think that a lot of my criticisms are very valid. And I don't want to get into a discussion about that film. Listen to the review, hit me up. I'm happy to talk to you about it, about what it has to say. But I will say the similarity is, the comparison is appreciated, because that is a film where similarly I do appreciate it more for what it's saying and what we can discuss by way of what's presented through that film. But
Sure.
it is just such an oppressive and uncomfortable viewing experience.
Well,
I really
only
hope
bring
you
it
watch
up.
it one day so you can just validate that for me or not.
No, I'm not going to watch that. I only bring it up because of his previous work. To me, that would be the contract that you're discussing. Does he have now an agreement with you as a viewer, an enjoyer of his previous films, going into his new film to be consistent or to entertain you in that same way? I'm going to, because it's a brand all of a sudden. Now it's like, I'm going to see the new Ari Aster film or the new Robert Eggers film or whatever, or Steven Spielberg film or what, like you brought up. So does he have an obligation to provide you with a similar product? I like Cheez-Its. What if there's they switch Cheez-Its to aged blue cheese, and all of a sudden it tastes like old stinky socks? You know what I mean? Like blue cheese and cilantro Cheez-Its, and you're like, oh God. But then that's all of a sudden like all they offer. They took all the rest of the stuff off the it's like, so do they have an agreement with me to provide me with my Cheez-Its? I don't know. Again, I'm a free market guy. So to me, that'll all sort itself out when no one buys the stinky feet Cheez-Its. They're all about the old classic cheddar. That'll come back. Original Coke. Or new recipe. Remember that?
Sure.
Did they have an obligation to provide me with my original Coke, or could they go back to the old recipe? So I don't know.
That's strictly consumerism. So here's a good point, I think, that illustrates.
But art is
right?
consumption.
True. Okay. So let me ask you this question though.
These two things are intertwined in your question. That's kind of what I'm
absolutely.
saying.
So let me ask you this question. We both, I think, seem to agree that the film would have worked better if it was half an hour shorter. Fair?
Yes.
So
maybe.
Okay, but we would have enjoyed it
I'll
more
explain
if it was half
in a
an
minute.
hour
Finish your
shorter,
point.
right? Yeah. So that's my point, is at what point do we think, or do we believe, Ostlund should or should not have taken that into account? Like, hey, you know what? The movie I want to make is 2.5 hours, but I know that the movie people want me to make is 2 hours. So what do I do? Right. And that's where that's sort of illustrative of like, what is the responsibility of the artist? Do they stay true to their guns? Do they consider the audience? Do they split the difference? Or, likely, as is likely the case, does it vary on a case by case basis?
I would argue that in this particular case, in the case of cinema, because each medium is going to be different. I'm going to have a different answer for, and that's why this is a loaded question. You queued that up at the top. In all fairness to your question, but in cinema is not a single voice medium. You watch the credits; there are hundreds of people there. It's a system of checks and balances, and everybody has a job to do. So if you're talking about runtime or pacing or certain things like that, yes, certain artists can have final cut. Certain movies are more scaled down and are more singular in their voice. But at the end of the day, you have editors, you have producers, you have test screenings and test audiences. If the director, whose vision this is supposed to be, who's steering the ship, the captain of this whole thing, decides to overlook all of that and push forward anyway, because this is his vision and he wants to provide that experience as a art installment of sorts, then press on. Because I would say, to your question a moment ago, the movie itself would be more enjoyable at about a half an hour less, at about 2 hours. But I would argue the counterpoint to that is that the movie is meant to make you feel uneasy, unsettled, awkward, and each scene seemingly goes on a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes longer than you ever want it to. And that all tallies up to that extra 30 minutes backloaded on the end of the film, because he makes you sit in it in these uncomfortable positions. I'll use an example, the sex scene with Elizabeth Moss.
Sure, yeah.
Now, normally in cinema, when you see a love scene or a sex scene, you're getting dramatic lighting, you're getting multiple camera angles, camera movement going across bodies, sexy angles, cutaways. But in this particular case, it's portrayed as sex kind of happens, for better or worse. It's a single angle. You're kind of just watching it. There's not a lot to it. There's no sexy lighting. It's Elizabeth Moss. Most of it is Elizabeth Moss on top, riding him. And there's no sexy music playing. There's no Sade or The Weeknd doesn't kick in. There's nothing really driving it. It's just her awkwardly doing the thing that we all do. And
it's a very tedious sex scene for sure.
It just lays it bare to the, the naked apes that we all kind of are just doing it. And so as such, it's very awkward to watch, to sit in that and watch somebody. Now, it's not awkward to do. I quite enjoy it, but it is awkward to watch somebody else do it from that perspective.
Well, and especially because like he's so detached from it, right? I think that's also the point of that scene too. Like when we're watching his face, like he seems borderline bored, right? Like he's just sort of like waiting for it to end. And it's just like a thing he needs to do to check off the box because he's Mr. Big Swinging Dick, and like this is what's expected of him, kind of.
Well, and because it's so uncinematically portrayed, we're kind of bored. Like we get bored with it. But Ostlund, my point is, Ostlund makes you sit in it and sit there and like. And then now it's getting awkward, and so it's not sexy, really. And so I think a lot of I only use that as one example of many that I think a lot of scenes kind of go on just a little bit longer because he's making you uncomfortable and uneasy. And then when you get to that point in each of those moments throughout this film, that's kind of where the satire lies to me. That's where the film succeeds. And so that's why even that is a loaded question. If I think it would be better at a half an hour shorter, because I think that then you lose a lot of that uneasiness. And the edge of this film, because you're not sitting in those moments too long. Because when you sit in those moments too long, the 8-man scene with Thierry Notary, same thing. Like I get the point a minute or two in. He's doing a monkey man thing. He's jumping on tables. I would argue that the audience of that, which by the way, if my research is correct, was a real audience of socialites that didn't know what he was going to do.
Did I happen to see Warren Buffett among that audience? Was that Warren Buffett?
I swear I saw Warren Buffett. I'm so glad you said that. Yep.
Which again would make sense because it's the 1% of the 1%. So
yes. Because I did read that it was filled with real socialites and high class, upper crusty people, and they did not know what to do with that. So, but after a minute or two, it's entertaining, but then you go further and further, and then he gets to the woman, and he starts pulling her hair and borderline sexually assaulting her. And it's very uncomfortable and hard to watch, and it just keeps going, and nobody knows how to respond. And it's in those moments that he's really holding a mirror up to us as consumers, as the entertained, as society as a whole, and our culture, to really kind of stew in that and ask ourselves, where is the line that we want to draw in that? So when you start cutting that and tightening the film up, I think you lose some of those moments. So that's a confusing question. I'm not sure how to answer it, but that's the best I could do.
Yeah, no, it's fair. Yeah. And I think that there's a very interesting thing that happens when we extend scenes beyond the rhythm of what cinema would usually do in that case, right? Because there's this, again, like when we watch, especially if you've seen as many movies as we have, but even as just a culture, as an audience, we're conditioned to sort of understand the rhythms of certain scenes, right? We generally know about when a love scene is getting started, and we know when it's coming down. We know when an action scene is being geared up. We know when it's in full throttle. We sort of understand like the inherent beats associated with a lot of these sort of traditional approaches. So when you have a filmmaker that comes in like Ostlund did with this film and intentionally elongates the language and the rhythm of these scenes, it's almost like this timer starts ticking in us, right? And an interesting thing happens where the longer you draw it out, the more we as an audience become detached from the film, okay? And that's what I think is so interesting about this film is I think that's an intentional device that Ostlund uses where he's drawing a lot of these scenes out because he wants us to think about them, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I come back full circle to the top of the show where I say it's an interesting film to consider because for all the reasons that it's less enjoyable in the moment, those are the reasons that it succeeds in considering it after the fact and discussing it the way that we are here today. And so to your point, if you trim that up, then maybe it works better from a pacing perspective. But A, now I haven't had time to consider these thoughts. B, I'm not factoring that calculus into my overall response to the film. And then now, to your point from earlier, it's literally just a movie about a guy doing nothing for a month straight, right? Because without all of these themes that are being explored and communicated, it's a pretty shallow film. It's not about the narrative. And that's why I say the narrative only exists to bring about these types of questions and ask these matters of us. And so, yeah, that's what makes it so difficult because, again, if you make it more quote unquote enjoyable, it becomes a lesser film.
Yeah, I mean, the narrative of this film is really just awkward happenings that go on to this Swedish museum curator. And so at the end of the day, it's really just a highbrow Seinfeld episode, where just awkward things are happening to these characters.
Instead of like the bass,
cufflinks,
it's like done on violin, like da, 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 da.
Perfect. Yeah.
The little clarinet comes in at the end.
Right. Did you ever know? Yeah. So I'm not going to do a Seinfeld episode impression. That's terrible.
What's the deal with these high-end art people? They want a
deal
performance,
with
but
this
then you bring
square?
a monkey man, and all of a sudden they're scared.
but just making you stew in these things, and a lot of them happening from single camera angles in real time, is awkward, but intentionally so. And I would say that the success of this film then hinges on, because he's going to make you stew in it, hinges on the performances, on the cinematography. That's where the technicality of this film really shines. Like you were saying at the top of the episode, we're going to keep throwing it back to each other, is because technically this was a brilliant film for me. And hot take, not so hot take. Notoriously, if you've ever watched this show, it's no secret that I'm not a fan of bloated films like this. I should be the first critic of how long this film is and how they could have trimmed it down. And now I would say that if you wanted to spare 20 or 30 minutes, 40 minutes even, and get it back down, I would have not cut the scenes as much as I would have taken out one of those subplots. I think that maybe it was a little over bloated with how many things were going on at any given time. He's a very busy dude. Like shit's going on to this guy, like consistently. You got the little boy, after he gets his cufflinks and his wallet stolen, in what I believe to be the square. Was that, let me ask you that. Did that happen in the art installment? Is it your take on that?
I don't recall, to be honest.
I think that square was happening outside the museum. They show in one of the opening scenes, they put the placard with that describes the square, and they show the box and all of that. I think he was outside when he got pickpocketed. It's right around that area, but
I don't think it was in the actual square because the square itself is like really small though. I think it was
around that area,
square, like a town square, but I don't think it's in the actual art exhibit.
Moral of the story is, the irony is he's creating that as a safe space of being gracious and hospitality and taking care of your brother man. And then he spends the entire rest of the film trying to get his shit back after it was taken, and his connection to all his personal belongings after it was taken by somebody. And then, they go so far as to go to the complex after he's tracked down his cell phone by the person that stole his shit. And he's harassing, all these other people that are, of a lesser, in a lower social class than him. So thereby demeaning his whole premise of his, the social commentary of his art installment. So, that part that wasn't lost on me, but because now he's going to this, apartment complex, then now they're showing all these subplots of all the people that he's like kind of harassing to get his shit back. Plus you got the Elizabeth Moss subplot, you got the advertising bros subplot and all of that. And then even just other exhibitions going on in the museum and the chef that's cooked for for the opening of the thing. So yeah, I think they could have trimmed some of that back versus making the scenes less shorter or whatever, because I think the point was to make you stew in it a little bit, which I think worked for me. I should not have liked this movie as much as I did. I really did enjoy it.
Yeah. Now, stylistically, the film has several specific aesthetic qualities and themes. And one of these that most stands out is its approach to sound design. And there's a ton of sequences where the film is relatively quiet. Usually it's two people or more. I don't think there's really many sequences where it's just Claude or anyone else by themselves. And in almost all of the instances, there's a sort of droning, solitary sound, right? Or aural sort of experience going on. So it could be like at the opening scene where there's the buzzing of that neon sign that's just, laid underneath the entire conversation, and it just stays there. In the following sequence where they go to the office to discuss the marketing campaigns, there's the guy who's holding his baby, and it's a really a pretty quiet session that they have, except for this like baby's cry that's just like sort of overtakes everything else, right? Or even just by use of the soundtrack, we get a lot of sequences where it's just a song, like an EDM dance song, or one of my favorite scenes when they play the Justice track in the car. Just because I absolutely love that song. It's a great song.
That was a nice surprise. Yes.
Ja, ska det nu? Skål.
It just, it's the driving force of that scene. And we don't really hear too much else besides just, that one thing that's going on. So, and that's sort of an interesting approach to sound design. But by the way, real quick aside, I have to say, I don't know why the film did this, and I don't know if you have any idea, but the guy in the car who's like, put in justice to Claude, and then he puts it in and he's like, play track 5, move track 5. Dude, you got to play track 5. It's all about track 5. And then they play track 5 and it's Genesis. Genesis is track 1 on that album.
Oh,
so
shit.
I don't know why they would use a real song and a real album and then have like a fake track list.
That's very strange.
Yeah, super weird. Again, it's a small touch, but I considered it, and I didn't understand what the point of it was.
The only thing I could think of would be maybe that obviously then that would mean as soon as he cues up that album per the dude's request, it's going to immediately go to the track versus him requesting a new track. So it's like, we've got to make it a later track then, because the song he wants is going to be the one that it starts up. So I don't know, unless it was on shuffle or something, but because then it would start with track 1. So then the song he wanted would just be there, and there's no chance to ask for something else. But then why ask for something else? Like, why do you need to?
Yeah, exactly. Why would you even need to do that, right? Just play Justice.
There could have been some of that time we want to
track. The opening track's dope, dude. Opening track. Like, you could just as easily do that. So, and I do feel like, again, like it's one of those things where I'm asking because I wonder if I feel like there might be something there and I just haven't quite grasped it, because again, the film does many things to detach you and say like, oh, stop getting into the story, right? Take a step back and think about it, like from a detached perspective. And that was just yet another instance of that.
The only thing I could think of isn't that dude that dude's in the back seat, right?
Yeah.
So the whole way through that whole adventure, that guy's full of ideas. You should do this. We should do that. We're going to go get revenge. You're going to put this CD on. We're going to go to this people. We're going to print out. We're going to put it in all the boxes. We're going to go get your shit back. That guy's just full of ideas, full of gusto. And then when he finally gets to the moment, he makes Christian then go do his own dirty work. And then Christian's like, well, this was your idea. And, kind of basically leading up to, you've been nothing but ideas this whole way. And then now we got to go do it. And you're making me go do it. And he's like, yeah, man, I want to, this is your business. Like all of a sudden, that's kind of the satire, is like maybe holding a mirror up to people that are always in your life full of, commentary. But then it's like, well, then, yeah, let's go do that. It's like, no, not me, bro, you. Yeah. And so I think maybe that has some kind of like character development, having him always chime in, and even so much as he's in the back seat, he's like a backseat driver. He's like a backseat driver of life. He's just constantly chiming in. And it's like, well, then you fucking drive. He's like, no, I don't want to. I don't have my license. One of those type deals.
Yeah,
so maybe
I don't know. It was a strange decision, but I did want to ask you directly as well. In a film where so much of the decision making is driven by theme and by sort of these like outside commentaries. Mm-hmm. I considered the sound design and that, again, that repeated theme of, using these sort of solitary dronings. And while it is an interesting choice, I think it works to great effect, right? We've seen David Lynch used that to great effect in The Elephant Man. He had a lot of those moments, right? And but the thing about it is, it's, when you do that, I feel like the net result is one of unsettling your audience, right? And so I do often wonder, were you able to sort of like understand thematically why he chose to use that sound design and what that meant? Or do you think it was just him trying to have an interesting aesthetic without necessarily saying more about film and cinema beyond that, Like, is this one of those things where he's just like, I think it looks cool, or do you think he's actually saying, or sounds cool, or do you think he's actually like trying to say something that we haven't picked up on maybe?
Again, to me personally, my take on this, and I think art is subjective, and I think that this movie is very much that way. But to me, everything served the purpose of unsettling you. You said it best. So, going back to what I just said a moment ago, he makes you sit in these situations just a minute or two longer than you want. I think the music and that droning kind of underscore is meant to unsettle you. He wants to make you feel awkward. The sex scene is like, unsettlingly quiet. Again, there's no sexy soundtrack. There's no camera movement. There's no dramatic lighting. Everything is kind of laying bare the awkwardness of humanity and the things that we go through every day. And then in this movie, especially as it pertains to art, and expressing yourself and all of that. And the satire of it all. So I'm not saying it worked always, but I do think that that's, to me, what purpose it served. I think, because obviously they could have, hired a great composer and brought it in and all of that and got this nice swelling score and like really hit the crescendos and amplified the moment. But, what's more haunting, to have like, a cool Beastie Boys soundtrack as you're on a New York subway going to, your destination, or just sitting in the subway and hearing the clickety clack and then hearing, the homeless person next to you rambling on. And then this person's talking on the phone behind you, like all the natural sounds of what that actually is like. Sure. Those are going to be two different experiences for me as a viewer / listener. Or just like you said, an unsettling drone or something underneath, I think serves that purpose well. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, before I tell you what I think, I do just want to ask you like a simple question with a very complex answer. Okay.
Okay.
And that is why. Well, like, why in this film does he choose to unsettle? That is a question that I wrestled with that I could never really come to understand, because we've got a satirical element, right? And
sure,
that's supposed to be like funny and making fun of these, upper crust people and all of that. And so there are a lot of the themes, what is art? A lot of these themes that we've discussed, and as I wrestled with them, I was able to come to conclusions. But there's a couple that I didn't, and the first is that, again, we've both acknowledged that a lot of the sound design did have an unsettling effect. I believe that he's demonstrated himself to be an effective filmmaker who knows what he's doing. So I would have to then give him the credit of saying he probably did that intentionally to unsettle us, right? Yeah. But then I can't understand why. Like, why in this film would you unsettle your audience? What is the point of doing so? And I do also wonder if this is tied into another theme that I didn't necessarily come to a firm determination on, which is the whole theme of the homeless and beggars. I really struggled to understand what the film wanted me to think or what it was saying about the homeless. Like it shows up constantly. We see many scenes of people begging for money from Claude and him saying, "Oh, sorry, I don't have any." We've got the scene where he buys her the food. There's an allusion to it where the marketing guys are talking about, what's the one thing on social media that gets people most riled up and most talking and most, divisive is homelessness, And so it's constantly brought up and presented in different angles. And yet I have no idea if the film was saying, oh, we need to be compassionate and these people because that would be the traditional thing is like, look at all of these very well-to-do people ignoring all of the lesser to-do people, right? And that would be very easy to understand. But if I'm being honest, I didn't feel like the film was telling me that. But I also didn't feel like the film was telling me that I should necessarily be mocking these people. And so again, like I know it did feel at times like it was. I was trying to feel like maybe like, okay, this doesn't seem like a dude, like a guy who's exploring all of these things. I don't feel like he would be telling me to like mock homelessness, but then at times it kind of felt like he was. And I wasn't really, it was very, again, I never really came to terms with like, why is this in this? Like, I understand what you're asking me over here, but like, what are you asking me over here? I had a hard time with that. Herein
lies my problem with this film. Now, we've gushed about it plenty. Let's go ahead and turn the corner a little bit and talk about some of the problems I had with it. And the main one is you touched on it perfectly. And that is, I think that this film is trying to do too much.
Okay.
If I had a criticism of it, I think that, okay, you're a satire. You're going to make commentary, social commentary, and kind of put humanity under a microscope and this and that. But you're doing it from so many angles in so many different ways by making the vehicle for that, call it a month. What would you agree with that? This is probably about a month in this guy's life-ish, give or take. That now it's so situational that we're going through, and it's like, now you're just venting. Like, to me, it just turns into, and then also this and also that, versus trying to make a more of a unified statement on something. It's more scattershot, and everything this guy touches, there's a commentary on this, there's a commentary on that. Yeah. And homelessness is one of the things, there's an impoverished person or a homeless person that's in the fast food restaurant or 7-Eleven or whatever, and they're hungry. And then he goes to get them, what do you want? I'll help you, blah, blah, blah. He's trying to be gracious, gets them a chicken sandwich. You could argue that it was kind of begrudgingly, but he buckles down and does it. I'm going to get you some food. Then all of a sudden they start being finicky about it. Could you do it with no onions? Do this, do that.
And really demanding about it too. Not even like, but just like, no, you need to do it this way. Like,
so that's kind of a commentary on, society doing the whole thing of like, it's kind of like the old thing of like, everything's so expensive, inflation, I can't afford anything. But then we all have big screen TVs, iPads, Apple Watches, iPhones, all this shit. So it's like, well, what's which is it? Can you afford it or not? Are you hungry or not? Because a real hungry person, if we were to go into an impoverished, third world country or whatever like that, they'll fucking take the chicken sandwich, onions or not. They'll figure it out. They'll pick the onions off, whatever. If you're hungry and you're starving, But, it's like when your kid tells you on the way, I'm starving. It's like, you're not. Or I'm bored. Yeah. It's like, bro, you've got 3 entertainment systems, blah, blah, blah. You got the internet, every movie known to man, at your fingertips to stream. You're not bored. You're just picky. So, I think that there's some commentary on that, but because it's just so, we're moving and shaking, commentary on this, commentary on that, personal relationships, love life, sex, socialite culture, what is art, homeless people, impoverished, money, classism, all these things. He says he's for, being, helping out people and being gracious with his wealth, but then spends half the movie getting his shit back from people that, probably needed it more than he did. And he's already replaced the stuff. So yeah, I just think it's so all over the place that some of these messages get lost. And then all of a sudden there's a, ape man that shows up. And then, now we're back into the classist thing, but kind of not. But what is art? And now it's going on too long. And now he's like sexually assaulting this woman. So, man, it's just like so all over the place that it's hard for me to find a singular voice to find out where am I supposed to hitch my wagon to on this. to find your statement, because we're making all these little mini statements. Again, it kind of becomes a Larry David Curb Your Enthusiasm thing. And then so much of it is told, and I'll kind of throw this back to you, but this was something that was interesting to me. Oftentimes you roll satire in with comedy. And I think that satire it's like a Venn diagram. I think there's definitely an overlap between those two circles, but satire is not always comedy. You're holding a mirror up to society in a lot of ways. And making kind of look at things. Comedy, is this movie is not laugh out loud funny in most cases.
It's just
very
a different
awkward
type of comedy. Yeah, I mean,
in a way,
satire can be comedy, but it's like
it can be comedy.
Like
I said, there's
like
overlap.
British comedy, right? Like it's not the type of like laugh out loud comedy. It's more like, oh, that's clever, like I get it type of thing.
And so much of it is timing and presentation. This is presented in a very awkward way. So Ostlund is the guy that's going to show a man getting ready for work, and he doesn't have any clean underwear. So he put on his khakis without underwear. He's going to, just go out of the world free balling it. Okay, great. And then an hour later, we see that he's got a fart and he shits his pants. And then the comedy of that is, oh, he shit his pants. Ha ha ha. But Ostlund is going to make you sit there in total silence with no music and watch this guy have to walk around with shit on his pants. And so that's something that we as humanity could like look at that and be like, wow, that is an awkward situation, but it has happened to people, and that's really sad. But it's not funny necessarily. It might have been for a second, but Ostlund is going to make you watch it for 3 more minutes than you ever wanted to. And so, and then people comment on it or whatever. And so, this movie is, and then we're moving on to something else. He's, dealing with a custody battle with his kids and his ex-wife. Like there's just so much going on that is really hard for me to pick up on. I could take any one of these things and go down that road with him, or 10 of these things and go down that road with him. But I think that is kind of getting back to what I was saying earlier. That's where I would have trimmed the 20 or 30 minutes, is like, say less, bro, as the kids like to say.
But at the same time, I was really impressed by the fact that there are certain sequences that demonstrate that he really knows what he's doing, and he really kind of understands human nature and can tap into that to make some points. Sure. I want to ask you directly, and then I'll be completely honest with you about how I responded to the scene. I believe it's the first time Dominic West shows up, and it's when he's being interviewed, and there's the man with Tourette's in the audience.
Yes.
And it goes on very, very long.
Great example.
So, and then there's the guy who chimes in at the end. So what was your response to that whole scene? Like, what was your chain of events as you were watching it, so to speak? And did anything hit you about that? Yeah,
because in an average film, that person would be removed, something would be done, there'd be a cause and effect, relationship there. But man, that scene just keeps going, and that person keeps getting more vulgar. Again, that was kind of where I started to realize, oh, he's just fucking with me. Like, he's just trying to make me feel awkward. These are intentional decisions. The droning soundtrack, the silence during the sex with the single camera angle, everything is kind of just showing situations, how they might actually happen to us in society, not through the lens of cinema, where you have pacing and cutaways and things to save you. This is, you're going to have to stew in it. That was another one of those moments to me. And I didn't like it, but it wasn't meant to be enjoyed. It wasn't meant to be funny. I think also, it's kind of a statement on how sensitive are we going to be as a society, in the sense of, we're always sticking up for people with disabilities, but to what end? People that have a certain issue or whatever. That person had Tourette's, and his Tourette's, Tourette's it can expose itself or have symptoms in various ways. Some people click, some people say things. It's a stereotype that it always has to be a vulgar statement or whatever.
Sure, of course,
But South Park had that episode where Cartman queued up on that and decided that was how he could be vulgar in class and say whatever he wanted. But that's the stereotype. But in this case, Ostlund is kind of saying that in the name of being politically correct and not wanting to hurt anyone's feelings, we're just going to let this happen, even in the most reverent of situations and a quiet interview where people are trying to work, get their jobs done, advertise their work or their art, express themselves, and then people can just say or do whatever they want or bring their disabilities or whatever in with them to that environment. Where do you draw the line on that? Again, satire, holding mirror up to society, making us face maybe our own shortcomings in a social agreement or contract, as you said earlier. The agreement that we're all going to get together. Press is going to ask questions. Artist or exhibitor is going to answer the questions to maintain, or to advertise. But then you have this. Now you throw this wrench in the mix. What does everybody do? Do you get them out of there? Do you ask them to leave? The woman, his wife, said, "You'll have to excuse him. I'm very sorry. He has Tourette's." And everyone's like, no, let's be sensitive. And then it keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. Where do you draw that line? And I think Ostlund was kind of asking that question. But because that was like just another one of those speed bump isolated incidents along the way, how am I supposed to really derive anything when we're immediately thrust into the next predicament that this guy gets into in a very Larry David Seinfeldian kind of way? We're just being whisked along to the next awkward thing. And that's where I think the film fails. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that does lend itself to the larger theme of the film is just asking a lot of like, where is the line drawn? And that's probably maybe where the homeless thing comes in is like, where is the line between compassion and not? There's a lot of how much do we tolerate sort of like a commitment and, like how much do we tolerate doing something in the name of art, for example? And I think that's a lot of the idea behind that Gorilla Man scene, which we'll get to here in just a little bit. But yeah, I think that, so for me, an interesting thing happened. And I think that it's designed, a lot of these moments are designed to give you a reaction where it can go either way, and he's just saying, hey, here's how this situation, and it's up to you how you respond as a person, because in that Tourette's scene, at the beginning, it's like, okay, yes, this gentleman has Tourette's, and I as a viewer am trying to, much like the rest of the audience, be compassionate about that. But then it goes on for so long and it's so drawn out and it's so disruptive that at a certain point,
graphic. Very obscene.
Exactly. At a certain point, I'm like, this is starting to maybe get a little bit, uncomfortable or beyond the line of tolerance, or like, it kind of seems at this point like the wife should have maybe taken him out at this point. But either way, it seems like we're getting to a point where maybe this gentleman should be removed. And then that's exactly when they have the other guy who in the audience who very loudly proclaims, and he says, everyone, we need to remember that this man has a neurological condition. He is not responsible for what he is doing. And it is, up to us to blah, blah, blah. And I kind of had to check myself for a minute after he said that and be like, oh yeah, you know what? You're right. Like I do need to consider that. But then it would be just as likely for someone else to say, yeah, but you know what? In spite of that, we've gone beyond what's acceptable. And so just the fact that he can guide those emotions through that scene. And again, if we don't sit in that, we don't become frustrated at ourselves and then have that emotion to respond to whichever way you may have gone with it. And that's a feat of brilliance in filmmaking and somebody who's in complete control of their craft. Yet, to our point that we've reiterated over and over, it is not an enjoyable experience in and of the moment,
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that's a really good scene that illustrates a lot of these sort of concepts that we're discussing, Yeah,
it makes you really question where do you draw the line as a person? At what point did you feel awkward, and that's your line, you get to kind of explore that a little bit in a very different but similar kind of way. To me, that'd be like bringing a crying baby with colic into a movie theater. Okay. It's just a baby, she's sick, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, maybe they go baby out there like that, go do the baby thing. Like we're trying to all do this. And then you have now brought your situation into our world and our environment now that we're forced to adapt to cater. I don't know if that's a great example, but in a very similar way, it's kind of like, it makes you ask yourself that question of like, on one hand, of course, like, we all would have, sympathy or pathos or empathy, towards that person, but everyone has their line, and where is yours? And we're going to find it right here on fucking the square.
And what's interesting too is that in and of itself is asking, what is the nature of the social contract between all of these various people?
Sure.
And, in looking at it again, it's just yet another of those questions. What is the social contract between, the regular modern class society and the homeless, right? Or the impoverished.
Yes.
What is the, nature of the relationship between, the public and people with, neurological conditions or physical conditions or all of this, what is that contract? Who owes what? Who owes who what and how much of that, right? And which way does it flow, or which ways do the expectations flow? And again, these are very interesting concepts. Like, I didn't love this film, but I love that we can talk about this stuff after it as a result of it. It's great. So.
Yeah. And it really makes me want to go and watch his other films, Force Majeure and Triangle of Sadness, because I think he is a genius. I just don't know that this film was for me. This film, some of it is just the world that it takes place in. This is a very New Yorker cartoon kind of satire. And some of it was just too highbrow for me to really kind of, gather. I appreciate what he was getting at. But I think that, given a different, if he translated that message in a different way, and it's my understanding that Triangle of Sadness handles a lot of these satire, cultural, holding a mirror up to society kind of issues as well, class issues and stuff like that. So I'm anxious to go down that rabbit hole with him and see what else this guy has in the tank, because I think he's a very capable filmmaker. I do think that this film maybe wasn't his strongest, and so I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what else he's got. Let me go before we wrap up. I do want to throw something else to you, because after we've discussed all these themes and all these different things he's talking about, difference between this and this, and holding you in it too long, and blah blah blah. What do you think he was saying with the elephant in the room, or the gorilla in the room, we'll say 500-pound gorilla in the room? What do you think he was saying in all these same ways we've kind of broken down these other scenes with the ape man scene with the dinner, where Terry Notary, who, for those who don't know, is kind of like, look him up on IMDb. The guy's got a list like no one's business. He's done, he's kind of like an Andy Serkis type. The guy's done mocap and choreography for insanely large movies, not the least of which are all the Planet of the Apes films and stuff like that. So Avatar. So he's done a lot of the Na'vi. So Andy Serkis type, and he plays this this performance art piece in the midst of this what I could only assume are like museum donors or like big, upper crusty people. Like you said, Warren Buffett is there. We think maybe it's Kirkland brand Warren Buffett.
Get at us, Warren. We know you listen to the show.
Yeah, Buffett with like one F and one T, maybe an I. So
I'm Warren Buffet.
His name is War and Buffett. Yeah, so it's very long. So I was curious where I wasn't sure what he was, because obviously the awkwardness is there. Making you sit in it is there. The scene goes on a few minutes longer than you want. It transitions into, it starts as kind of like everyone's chuckling. The whole thing plays to silence. It's just the ape man. So there's no music. There's nothing really except for him just going around and the audience kind of laughing or being awkward. By the time he gets to almost sexually assaulting the woman, what do you think his statement is there? Because that's that's like the most popular scene. Obviously the dude's on the box art, but so it's like gotta be his biggest, most grandiose thing he's trying to do. And it's very well shot, very well performed, but why?
Sure.
What's your take on that?
So I believe that this sort of is the reason that it lands is it's just an effective film or an effective sequence. To your point, the guy crushes the performance, but also I think because it does very prominently reinforce this film's central theme and these central questions, which is, what is art? And very tied to that, what is the social contract between artist and consumer, and where do we draw the line, right? Just the same way we talked about where do you draw the line between compassion for homelessness, where do you draw the line between allowing an artist to be an artist, right? And I think that it's asking questions like how far is acceptable when it comes to quote unquote pushing boundaries, right? We see this all the time, especially when it comes to performance art. And I do feel like this scene specifically is a comment on specifically performance art and what we allow to artists to do in the name of performance art, right? So you'll hear these especially in like the New York scene, right? Where there are these artists that will sit in a chair with before a TV tray and a scalpel. And the art exhibit is that people come up and grab the scalpel and slice their arm, right? Or make an incision small somewhere or whatever, right?
Right.
And, I think for a lot of mainstream consumers, you hear that or you see that or you ideate that. And it's like that, is that art? And if it is, what is the point of that? And even if the point, whatever your point is, isn't that perhaps maybe going too far in the name of that point, right? But then you ask the question like, okay, well, who is there to stop them? What are we to censor artists and say that, no, they can't do that? And I think that in that very similar fashion, this is an extension of that, right? How much are we willing to tolerate from an artist that is going to immerse themselves in a performance? And in this case, the answer is quite a lot. These very esteemed art collectors and wealthy people are giving the performer so much leeway. That social contract is, I as the consumer am here for you as the performer, and that is that is expressed by the fact that as he gets increasingly violent, and to your point, to the point of sexually assaulting a woman or right up to that point, everybody is allowing this. Because they have bought into this social contract that says, I am here for this performer. It is my job to be quiet and play along with what he is trying to do.
Sure.
And I think that the film I don't think the film looks at that in necessarily a positive light. I think that it's critical. I think it's saying like, look, art is one thing, but an entire room of like 250 people, 249 of you were arguably going to allow the performer to sexually assault that woman before all of us while we just sat here with our heads bowed. Why? Because this man was a gorilla? No, he is not a real gorilla. He is not a real silverback gorilla. We have signed a contract saying that we are going to pretend over the course of this dinner that he is a gorilla. And we're going to take it to such an extreme that when he goes to rape a woman, we're not going to stop him. It's one gentleman who finally gets up as the actor is literally on top of the woman, who gets up and starts beating him with a cane. And then another, at that point, 2 to 6 other people get up and join in. But again, I think that it's very critical of the fact that like, yes, we need to allow artists a certain amount of grace and freedom, but it's asking us where that line is drawn. And I think that's why that scene exists.
You bring up an interesting point too, because it's also kind of an exploration of groupthink. In the sense that we're all followers. And as long as everybody's seated and polite, no one wants to disrupt the performance. And we're all going to go through this. But the second one person breaks that bond and tries to save this woman and peel this guy off of her, then everybody else felt it was okay to do so as well. Now that, we pierced the veil on that and we're going to go through and we're doing something else now. So, it's kind of a bit of an examination of that, that just in the way that we're all, going to just sit by and, very few people are willing to, we'll walk right past problems that are happening every day on the street. And no one wants to get involved and break their little bubble that they're in until you see other people do it. And then it's like, I'll jump in and help. But no one wants to be the first one to do that. And so maybe, that had some kind of commentary on that as well. But I hadn't thought of that until you just brought it up.
Yeah, definitely. And then I do believe that the concept is reinforced through that viral marketing video. We've got like the two marketing bros that are just inhabiting this to the extreme and taking social media's most volatile topics and exploiting them, right? And the interesting thing, and I'll kind of sort of sum this up with a potential interpretation of the square and what that square exhibit specifically means, because so little attention is paid to it in terms of the actual narrative. It's not given much screen time, right? But the movie is called The Square, right? What now? I think there's a take, and I kind of like this take, where I believe that the square is actually a metaphor for film and television. Okay? I think that the square, you know, before a television was square, right? 4:3. Now we've got screens and it's more of a rectangle. But the same way that they took all this sort of sensational material and then like packaged it and then presented it as the square, I think there's something to that, because, you know, in this movie, all we see of the square is, you know, the homeless person exploited with the explosion and all of that, outside of the initial construction of it. And I think that there's an illusion there where that's the exact material that's sensationalized and presented to us on our screens, right? We're not getting a lot of, you know, artistic examinations. It's a lot of, especially going back to, you know, when television, you know, network television dominated, it was just playing to all of humanity's baser instincts, right? Let's get the explosions, let's get the sex, let's get the pull at the heartstrings. And so if you think of the square as like what we consume in terms of film and television, I think that that's potentially a metaphor for that.
I love that. That's a great take. I love that, because, you know, television and cinema was sold to us as this safe space where we could all come together and, you know, experience life and love and share our emotions and be open and express ourselves. And in the end, it's all just blowing shit up and exploitation and the violence and, you know, whatever sells to go viral. So I love that comparison. That's phenomenal. I hope Ruben Ostlund sees this and he's like, they're the only two that got it.
Hit us up, Ruben.
Love it.
Yeah. So, and then also, you know, before we do wrap, I just want to point out, I think we kind of touched on it, but, you know, we didn't really give enough credit to the technical aspects of this film. We kind of touched on it lightly, but really just do want to strictly point out that, you know, this is a gorgeous film, right? It's gorgeous to look at in terms of its photography and lighting. It's very elegantly made with regards to the camera push-ins and the dolly movements. A lot of very subtle, slow pans, slow push-ins. There's a lot of even like exploring space with camera, you know, like when the chef is addressing all of the rich people and, you know, Ostlund puts the camera down at the bottom of the stairs and like looks up at him as he's addressing him, right? So that he feels very big and powerful. So even among, you know, probably a net worth of $7 trillion in that building, this one chef is the most commanding person to all of them, right? You know, so the pacing, it's very slow, but it's very deliberate. You can't say that, I wouldn't expect that any of this is a surprise to Ruben Ostlund. I think that everything that we find slow or boring or whatever, like those are very deliberate choices that he made, that he wanted to invoke those emotions, for better, worse, or otherwise. And then, you know, the acting is solid, spot on, really great staging. So like, you know, we spent all this time talking about the theme of this film because I really feel like that's what this film has to offer based on, you know, the last hour and change of discussion, but also not to take away from the standpoint that it's a technically exceptional film. And to be honest, when you can speak such a strong visual language, that's sort of what tells me that you're someone worth taking seriously, right? If this was a shitty, sloppy movie that was all over the place, I wouldn't stop to consider all of these things. But because it's obviously made from someone who knows what he's doing, who understands film, who's speaking in a visual language that I can recognize as being, you know, elevated and elegant, it allows me to give him that like extra second of like, or, you know, those extra moments of like, yeah, let me consider what you're saying. Like, I didn't get this, but you seem like you're a smart dude. So let me take a step back and think about this some more. And in doing so, I was able to come to a lot of these observations that we've been discussing here on the show. And so really did appreciate the film from a technical standpoint. Like I said, even though I can't say that I always enjoyed it in the moment. So yeah, that kind of wraps up our look at The Square. Ryan, is there any final thoughts that you had before we go?
Dude, shout out to that little kid, that little pissed off kid that got the letter, that got grounded because his parents thought that he stole the cufflinks and the wallet. Oh, chef's kiss. I hope he's got a long, illustrious career ahead of him, because that was just like the performance that brought me right back in every time I was getting a little bored. That kid had a fucking soapbox to stand on. He had something to say, and I was here to listen to it. So
I do also love the way that the film sets up. Like, you totally think it's going to be his dad or like some like big giant dude, you know, because he leaves him the letter. And then you finally get that reveal, and it's this 11-year-old kid who's just like, screw you. You fucked me over, bro.
Who the hell do you think you are? Do you know I have not been able to play video games for a week because of your stupid... Oh, dude, I love it. Absolutely love it.
That was
hilarious.
Forward
To the film.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and get into our final star rating and 3 adjectives. Before we do, just want to once again shout out our podcast audience for listening and our YouTube audience for watching. If you guys could please make sure to like, rate, and subscribe, really helps us out. And then feel free to go ahead to our website, esotericacinema.com. We've got some good content for you there. And it's also an easy way to get in touch with us in case you want to make any comments on our reviews, request any films. We would be happy to hear from you. So Ryan, we do wrap up every review with our 3 adjectives before our star rating. Why don't you go ahead and explain real quick what 3 adjectives is before you go ahead and give yours?
Well, if you would just watch this film and you were talking to your friend like Jason and I are talking right now, what's just a quick few words or a quick phrase or something that you would use to describe this movie? And I'll give you an example. My first one is blurry brilliance, because I do think this movie is brilliant in a lot of ways. It's just a little confusing. Again, you know, while I was watching this film, I remember texting you and saying, you know, I'm an hour into it. I have no idea what this movie is about, but I am enjoying it. So it's blurry brilliance. My next one is highbrow satire, because this is kind of like a New Yorker cartoon. Sometimes you get it. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's not. Most times it's not. It exists for some people. But then that takes me to my next one, which is 5-star sushi, because I do not like sushi. Hot take. So it's probably the best version or a very good version of a certain thing that just may not be for me. But I appreciate that it exists, and I can look at it and be like, wow, that is some 5-star ass sushi. How about you, Jason?
Real quick disclaimer, Ryan's thoughts on sushi do not reflect the opinions of Esoteric Cinema as a whole. We are strong proponents of sushi and all sushi-related foods. Thank you for your service, fine cutlery men who cut such fine fillets of fish.
It's called sushi, not smeeshi, okay? Not for smee.
My 3 adjectives. First one, we've got technically elegant. It is an exceptionally made film. Some really strong camera movements, photography, acting, wonderfully all over the board direction. Second is overly plotting. This is a really slow film that moves at a very slow pace. It's taking its time getting to where it's going, whether you like it or not. And third is meta film and art commentary for all of the reasons we just discussed. Now, Ryan, I'm going to give my star rating, and I struggled with this. I went back and forth all the time. And ultimately, I settled on 4 stars, which is definitely higher than I was going to give it. And what I did is, because I was prepared to give it 3 stars just based on the viewing experience, right?
Sure.
And then I had the following couple days where I considered it and spent all this time with it, right?
Me too.
And for me, it's like, for me, I tell you all the time, right? Like I tell you often, you're like, well, how is that film? I'm like, perfect 3-star film. I had no emotions during it whatsoever. I didn't hate it, and I forgot it the moment I left the theater. Perfect 3-star film, right? And I can't say this about this movie. I thought about this film a lot, and I considered it a lot. And so for me, the film experience was a 3-star experience, but the discussion and the consideration of the film, and even just doing this episode with you, which I've had so much fun discussing with you, is absolutely a 5-star discussion. So I just had to like marry the two and give it the average of 4 stars with, you know, and it's one of those asterisk 4 stars, right? We've had this before where it's like huge caveat, right? Like it absolutely depends on what you want out of film. Like if you want to be entertained, this is a 2-star film. If you are willing to not be entertained for the sake of having a film that you can discuss for days and weeks on end, this is a 5-star film. Frankly, this is one of those things, whatever you think of this film, you're probably right. And honestly, I think Ruben Ostlund would say the same. So, but
probably
for those reasons, I'm going to give it 4 stars.
So you're going off of the Marcus Aurelius rating system is what we're going for here.
Are you not entertained?
Are you entertained? No? Okay, 3 stars.
No, that's the old Siskel and Ebert. They literally do thumbs up, thumbs down.
Sure. Yes.
So yeah. So again, 4 stars, but absolutely depends. You know, it's with an asterisk and comes with a disclaimer that breaks down who this film is for and what your star rating would refer to relative to what you wanted to get from it. So what did you think, Ryan? What's your formal rating?
Same type deal. I had to really do some soul searching on this one to find out, what am I rating? Am I rating the experience? Am I rating the art? Where do I draw the line? And I came up in a very similar fashion at 3.5 stars. So I kind of weighed on the other side of it. I think that there's probably a better version of this thing. I'm glad it exists. I would probably not recommend this to too many people. You really kind of got to be into... If you're still watching this might be the movie for you. If you've already tuned out and you're not listening to me right now, don't watch this movie. So
yeah, and if you don't have anyone to discuss this film with, or you're not willing to, you're not the type of person who wants to sit there and write out an essay, or examine this, you just, smoking a cigarette, having a drink, whatever. Yeah, again, if you're just going for pure entertainment, like this is a 1.5 star film. But again, if you're looking for something you can examine, it's a 5-star film. So
before we recorded this episode, I went on YouTube just to see what else was out there, if anybody else had any takes or something that I was missing or whatever. And very little exists talking about this in long format. There's a lot of 10-minute or under, very quick, speedy reviews. So what I'm hoping is people are going to watch this movie and be like, what the hell was that? And we're going to be the only show in town to hear your views, baby. So I hope you enjoyed this show, people out there that wanted to know what the hell they just saw. And Ruben Ostlund.
Yeah. And hey, look, our takes may not be right, but they're takes. And that's more than you're going to get from anyone else out there on YouTube right now. So,
right.
If you're in film class and your professor told you to interpret the square, you're welcome. We did all the work for you.
We are the chicken sandwich to the homeless person that wanted it without onions. You may get the onions, but we're the only show in town, baby.
Absolutely. So once again, a really interesting viewing experience. If you're somebody who considers themselves a cinephile, you feel like you've seen all of the movies out there and you're tired of seeing the same thing over and over, definitely check this out. Consider some of these things. As well, I will mention, if you have considered this film or you've really broken it down and you've come to different conclusions, please reach out to us. You can do so at the website. You can do so if you're watching on YouTube in the comments. But if you feel like we're off the mark on any of our interpretations, I would love to consider any alternative viewpoints. Because again, this is just how, Ryan and I responded to this film ourselves. This isn't based on any sort of, what Ostlund said in an interview or what Wikipedia says the internet has to think about this. So when it's this open to interpretation, there's probably going to be a lot of interpretations out there. So
we are raw dogging opinions out here on Esoterica Cinema.
Absolutely. So if you have a different take on this film, we would love to hear from you. Go ahead and hit us up, esotericacinema@gmail.com, or leave a comment in the reviews on YouTube. For myself, Jason Peters, and my good buddy Ryan Siebold, this has been Esoterica Cinema. Enjoy the movies.